Sometimes, life tests our strength in the most unexpected places. For Elena, that test came 30,000 feet above the ground, on a flight she would never forget. Welcome back to CJ Stories, where we bring you emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul. If you're just joining us for the first time, you're welcome to this wonderful big family. We're so glad to have you here. Please make sure to watch till the end, and if today's story moves you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and share this video with your family and loved ones. Now, let's dive into today's story. She thought it would just be a simple trip home, a few hours of turbulence, maybe some crying babies, and then a quiet landing where her son would be waiting. But instead, she found herself trapped between humiliation and a stranger who would change everything. It was early morning at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport in Atlanta. The kind of morning when the sun glows soft through the glass walls, painting sleepy travelers in golden light. Elena clutched her small, worn-out purse in one hand and her plane ticket in the other. She was nervous. Not because she was scared of flying, but because this trip meant more than most people could ever understand. She wasn't traveling for pleasure. She wasn't going for business. She was flying to Phoenix, to attend her late husband's memorial ceremony at the Air Force Base where he once served. It had been 2 years since the accident. 2 long, silent years since the night a knock on the door changed everything. Her husband, Staff Sergeant Malik Turner, had been her best friend, her protector, her safe place. And now, he was gone. But Elena kept going. For their son, Jordan. For the memory of a man who'd once promised, "I'll always watch over you, even if I'm miles away." She'd been holding it together, barely. Working 2 jobs. Smiling through exhaustion. Convincing her 7-year-old boy that everything was okay. But deep down, she was tired. So tired. Still, today was important. She wanted to stand by Malik's grave, tell him their son was growing strong, and whisper that she was still fighting. So, she pushed through the crowd at the airport gate, clutching her boarding pass. She smiled politely at the gate attendant, even as people bumped her shoulder, cut in line, and sighed loudly when she moved too slowly. It wasn't new. Elena had learned that when you're a young black woman with an economy ticket, some people automatically assume you don't belong. She ignored it. Like always. But fate, that morning, wasn't in the mood to let her pass unnoticed. Flight 234 to Phoenix is now boarding all passengers in Group C. Elena exhaled and joined the line. Her seat was 22B, middle seat. Of course. She'd booked late, after all. As she stepped onto the plane, the cold air hit her face, mixed with the sterile scent of recycled oxygen. Passengers jostled for overhead bin space, some arguing about luggage sizes, others already annoyed about the delay. Elena found her row, 22. The aisle seat was taken by a woman in her 40s, platinum blonde hair, designer sunglasses, and a look that said she didn't want company. The window seat, however, was empty. Elena smiled softly. "Hi, excuse me. That's my seat, 22B. The woman barely looked up. She sighed, scooted her legs an inch to the side, and muttered something Elena couldn't quite hear, something that didn't sound kind. Elena quietly sat down, tucking her purse beneath the seat. She pulled out a photo of her husband and son, took one long breath, and whispered a quiet prayer. And then, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Is someone sitting here?" Elena looked up. Standing before her was a tall man, clean-cut, composed, wearing a dark blue jacket with a subtle Air Force emblem on the chest. His eyes were calm, yet sharp. His tone, steady, respectful. She shook her head. "No, it's free." He smiled slightly and slid into the window seat beside her. As he sat, he nodded courteously. "I'm Daniel." "Elena," she replied softly. He gave her a warm, professional nod, then glanced at the photo still in her hand. "That your family?" She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Yeah. My husband and my son." Daniel's expression softened. "Your husband served?" She blinked, surprised. "How did you?" He gestured lightly to the ring necklace around her neck. "I recognize that tag. Air Force issued." Elena chuckled lightly. "Yeah. He did. Used to, anyway." Then her tone dropped quieter. "He passed away 2 years ago." Daniel nodded slowly. "I'm sorry for your loss." Something about his sincerity made her believe he meant it. He didn't say the usual clichés. Just quiet understanding. The plane began to taxi down the runway. Passengers adjusted their seats, the engines roaring beneath them. As the plane lifted off, Elena stared out the window, watching the world shrink beneath her. Clouds swallowed the city. The sun bled across the horizon. For a moment, she almost felt at peace. Almost. But peace didn't last long. Not on this flight. Because just as the seatbelt sign dinged off, the woman beside Elena, the same one who'd rolled her eyes earlier, decided to make her opinions known. And what started as a few sharp comments would soon turn into something ugly. Something no one expected. Except Daniel, who was watching everything, silently, patiently. And when the moment came, he would remind the entire plane what true honor looks like. The plane had settled into its rhythm. Passengers scrolled through phones, ordered drinks, or closed their eyes against the dull hum of altitude. Elena tried to relax. She reached into her purse, took out a small notebook, her peace journal, as she called it, and started jotting a few words to calm her nerves. She didn't know that even this small, gentle act was about to trigger someone's cruelty. The woman beside her, the one with the platinum hair, leaned over slightly, eyes narrowing. "Excuse me," she said sharply, "can you not keep elbowing me?" Elena froze. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to." "You did," the woman cut in. "You've been fidgeting since takeoff. Maybe try sitting still like an adult." Elena blinked. She hadn't even realized her elbow brushed the armrest. Her voice stayed calm. "I'll be careful, ma'am." But the woman wasn't done. "Oh, please. These economy seats are tight enough without someone spilling into my space." A few passengers nearby turned to glance. Elena's cheeks burned. She swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded, eyes down. "Sorry again." Daniel, seated by the window, shifted slightly. He didn't say a word. Not yet. He just watched. Carefully. The flight attendant rolled by with a cart. "Drinks or snacks?" The woman smiled suddenly, sweet, fake. "I'll have sparkling water with lemon. And," she added, glancing at Elena, "maybe a little patience from people who can't control themselves." The attendant's smile faltered. Elena pretended not to hear. She just wanted the flight to be over. The woman kept going. "So where are you headed?" she asked, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Family trip? Vacation?" Elena hesitated. "No. I'm attending a memorial." "Oh." The woman's eyebrow arched. "Military?" Elena nodded. "My husband served." The woman's tone shifted again, sharp and patronizing. I didn't realize they let just anyone marry soldiers these days." Daniel's jaw tightened. He turned slightly toward the aisle, his eyes narrowing just enough to show he'd heard. Elena inhaled deeply, trying to stay composed. "Yes," she said softly. "He was proud to serve." The woman smirked. "I'm sure he was." She turned back to her tablet, muttering under her breath. Elena's hands trembled slightly on her lap. She thought about her son, about how she'd promised to stay calm in difficult moments. But her chest felt heavy, the humiliation pressing down. Daniel finally spoke. His voice was low, steady, commanding, but polite. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I don't think that comment was necessary." The woman looked at him, startled. "And who asked you to join the conversation?" Daniel gave a small, professional smile. "No one. But sometimes silence only encourages more noise." The woman scoffed. "Oh, you're one of those, the chivalrous type." She rolled her eyes. "Mind your business." Daniel didn't respond. He just returned his gaze to the window, the muscles in his jaw flexing slightly. A few rows behind them, a young couple exchanged glances. They'd heard everything. The tension lingered like static in the air. Minutes passed, but the unease didn't fade. Elena tried to distract herself with music. She slipped in her earphones, pressed play on a soft piano track, something her husband used to listen to before missions. But then, another shove against her armrest. "Can you move?" the woman snapped. "I said, move." Elena flinched. "I'm not." Before she could finish, the woman reached over and pushed her elbow aside. Daniel's eyes snapped open. That was enough. He turned fully toward the woman, his tone still calm but ice-cold now. "Ma'am, that's enough." The woman gasped slightly. "Excuse me?" Daniel leaned forward just a bit. "You've made multiple unprovoked comments, and now you're putting your hands on another passenger. That's harassment." She laughed, a shrill, defensive sound. "Harassment? Oh please. Don't be dramatic." She was practically in my seat. A nearby passenger spoke up. "No, ma'am. We've been watching. You've been out of line." The woman's face flushed red. Her voice rose. "I don't have to listen to this." The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing light turbulence. Please remain seated." The timing forced silence into the cabin. Elena's hands were clasped tightly in her lap. She wanted to disappear. Daniel turned toward her, his tone soft again. "You okay?" She nodded weakly. "Yeah. Thank you." He smiled gently. "Don't thank me. People like that count on silence. We don't give them that power." For the first time that flight, Elena felt a small flicker of warmth in her chest. Someone had stood up for her, not out of pity, but principle. Still, the incident wasn't over. Not yet. Because when the turbulence passed and the seatbelt sign went off again, the woman wasn't done. She leaned in close, whispering sharply, "You think you can play the victim and get sympathy, huh? I've seen your type, always crying about being mistreated. Maybe behave properly and people wouldn't treat you that way." Elena's breath hitched. The venom in the woman's tone sliced deep. Before Elena could even process the words, Daniel slowly turned his head toward her again, his calm composure replaced with something darker. "Ma'am," he said, voice quiet but fierce, "I suggest you stop right there." The woman snorted. "And what are you going to do? Call the flight attendant?" Daniel reached into his jacket pocket, slowly, and pulled out a small, dark leather badge wallet. He opened it just enough for her to see. The color drained from her face. She read the insignia, United States Air Force Senior Officer Credentials. The woman froze. Passengers nearby leaned forward, whispering. Daniel's tone remained calm. "This isn't about rank," he said quietly. "It's about decency. And you're way out of line." The woman stammered, I didn't mean." Daniel cut her off gently. "You did. But now you have a choice. You can spend the rest of this flight in silence, or I can have the crew report this to the captain. Either way, it ends now." The woman's lips trembled. She turned away, sinking into her seat. For once, she said nothing. Elena stared at Daniel, eyes wide. "You're Air Force?" He nodded modestly. "Yes, ma'am." She smiled faintly. "My husband was, too." "I know," Daniel said gently. "That's why I couldn't sit by and let anyone disrespect him, or you." Elena's throat tightened. The tears she'd been holding back all morning began to fall, quietly, one by one. Daniel looked straight ahead, giving her space, a quiet guardian beside her, calm as the sky outside. And for the first time since her husband's passing, Elena didn't feel alone. What Elena didn't know yet was that this encounter wasn't over. Because sometimes, fate doesn't just send you protection, it sends you healing. And when this plane finally landed, Daniel's next words would change her life forever. For the rest of the flight, silence hung in the air like a fragile truce. The woman beside Elena stayed perfectly still, her arrogance deflated. Every so often, she'd steal a nervous glance at Daniel's badge tucked safely away, and then turn back to the window, lips tight. Elena leaned back in her seat, trying to steady her heartbeat. The clouds outside drifted by like soft white ghosts, and for the first time in hours, she could breathe freely. She wanted to say something to Daniel, something that could capture the gratitude, the relief, the sudden feeling of safety. But words felt small compared to what he'd done. So, she simply whispered, "Thank you, again." Daniel looked at her, his calm expression easing into a faint smile. "You don't need to thank me. Just promise me something." She tilted her head. "What's that?" He looked back out the window, eyes thoughtful. "Promise me you'll never apologize for taking up space." Elena blinked, caught off guard. Daniel continued softly, "I've seen too many people shrink themselves because someone else made them feel like they didn't belong. Don't ever let anyone do that to you." Her chest tightened. No one had ever said something like that to her, not since Malik. She smiled faintly, blinking back tears. "I'll try." Daniel nodded. "That's all you need to do. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be starting our descent into Phoenix shortly. Please fasten your seatbelts." Elena exhaled. Phoenix. Her heart raced again, this time not from fear, but from emotion. She was going back to the base where she and Malik had shared their last goodbye. Back to the same field where he had promised, "I'll come home safe." The plane dipped lower through the clouds. Sunlight bathed the cabin in gold, and Elena closed her eyes, imagining Malik smiling somewhere above the clouds. When the plane touched down, a ripple of relief moved through the passengers. Seatbelts clicked. Bags came down. Everyone was eager to leave. But before anyone stood, the platinum-haired woman turned slightly toward Elena, her face pale, voice small. I'm sorry," she muttered. Elena blinked, stunned. The apology wasn't warm, it was awkward and forced, but still, it was something. Elena nodded gently. "It's okay. I hope you have a good day." The woman gave a faint nod and grabbed her bag, rushing down the aisle as if trying to escape the weight of her own guilt. Daniel waited patiently beside Elena, letting everyone else exit first. When it was their turn to stand, Elena picked up her purse, and Daniel reached up to get her small carry-on bag. "You don't have to," she began. He smiled. "I know. But I want to." They stepped off the plane into the warm Arizona air. The terminal smelled faintly of coffee and sunscreen. Outside, the desert sun painted everything in sharp gold. Elena adjusted her bag strap and turned to Daniel. "So, you're stationed here?" He nodded. "Luke Air Force Base. I was on my way back from a conference in D.C. Her eyes widened. "That's the same base where my husband served." Daniel smiled faintly. I know. Malik Turner, right? Elena froze. How do you know his name? Daniel looked at her gently. Because I served under him once. Years ago. He was my commanding officer when I was just a lieutenant. Elena's breath caught. Her lips trembled. You knew him? Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes soft with memory. He was one of the best men I ever met. Fair. Brave. Always put his people first. Elena pressed a hand to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes, spilling freely now. I didn't know anyone still remembered him. Daniel smiled. Oh, we remember. Trust me. Men like him leave echoes. You can't forget someone like that. Elena's heart felt full and heavy at the same time. All those years of feeling invisible, and suddenly, this stranger, this quiet man from the seat beside her, had reminded her that Malik's legacy still lived. She took a shaky breath. I'm going to the memorial today. For him. Daniel nodded. I'll be there too. I'm one of the officers speaking at the ceremony. Elena's eyes widened again. You're the speaker? Daniel chuckled softly. Looks like fate had us sitting in the same row for a reason. They walked together through the terminal, their steps matching naturally, as if they'd known each other longer than a few hours. Outside, a gentle breeze blew through the palm trees near the parking lot. Daniel paused near the exit. Elena, he said quietly, your husband used to tell us something before every mission. She tilted her head. What was that? Daniel smiled. He'd say, don't just wear the uniform. Earn it, with how you treat people. Elena's eyes shimmered with tears. She could almost hear Malik's voice saying the same thing. Daniel reached into his pocket, pulled out a small silver pin, the kind used to mark commendations, and held it out. This belonged to him, he said softly. I kept it after his last mission. I was meaning to return it to his family someday. Guess today's the day. Elena took the pin with trembling hands. Her fingers traced the familiar emblem. She couldn't speak, only nod, overwhelmed. Daniel's tone turned gentle. He'd be proud of you, Elena. More than you know. She wiped her tears and smiled. Thank you. For everything. He nodded. See you at the memorial. And with that, he gave her a small salute, not the stiff kind from protocol, but a soft, human one, filled with respect. That afternoon, as the sun began to set over the desert horizon, Elena stood by her husband's grave. Rows of white headstones stretched across the field like waves in the wind. She clutched the silver pin in her hand, and for the first time in years, she didn't cry from grief, she cried from gratitude. As the ceremony began, she looked up and saw Daniel at the podium, his uniform gleaming in the sun. His voice carried over the crowd, strong, calm, filled with heart. Heroes, he said, are not just the ones who fight. They're the ones who love, who sacrifice, who protect others even when no one's watching. Today, we honor not just the fallen, but the families who keep their light burning. Elena's chest swelled. In that moment, she knew Malik was still watching over her. Maybe he'd even sent Daniel to remind her that kindness still existed, and that she was never truly alone. After the ceremony, Daniel found her standing near a photo board of Malik. He smiled softly. He'd be proud of you. She smiled back. And of you. They stood there for a moment in comfortable silence, the wind brushing through the flags around them. Elena finally spoke. You know, I was scared to come here alone. But I'm glad I did. Daniel nodded. You weren't alone. Sometimes, life places angels in ordinary seats, on ordinary flights, to remind us that we're stronger than our pain, and that compassion can heal wounds deeper than silence. Elena boarded that plane as a grieving widow, and walked off it reminded that her story wasn't over. And Daniel? He didn't just defend a woman that day. He honored a fallen comrade, and helped a mother find her peace again. The sun dipped low over Phoenix, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The memorial crowd had gone, leaving behind only the quiet hum of crickets and the whisper of flags rippling in the breeze. Elena stayed behind, standing by Malik's headstone. In her hands was the small silver pin Daniel had given her. It gleamed softly, catching the last light of the day, a piece of her husband's past, now returned to her heart. She knelt down, placed the pin gently on the grave, and whispered, I met someone today, Malik. Someone who remembered you. And because of him, I remembered me. For so long, Elena had lived in quiet survival mode, balancing bills, late-night shifts, and endless loneliness. She had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without fear. To feel safe. Seen. Respected. But that day, on a cramped plane at 30,000 feet, something changed. It wasn't just about the confrontation. It was about the moment someone finally said, you don't have to shrink anymore. That sentence echoed through her mind again and again, like Malik's voice coming through the clouds. She stood slowly, wiped her tears, and looked up at the wide Arizona sky. A plane passed overhead, cutting through the fading sunlight. Elena smiled softly. "I think you sent him, didn't you?" she whispered. And deep down, she felt it. Later that evening, as she walked out of the base gates, she found Daniel waiting near the parking lot. He wasn't in uniform anymore, just a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled up, hands in pockets. But somehow, he still carried that quiet strength. "You didn't have to wait," she said, smiling. He shrugged. "I wanted to make sure you got home safe." Elena laughed softly. "Still protecting people, huh?" Daniel smiled. "Old habits die hard." They walked together to the bus stop, talking like old friends. Not about war. Not about grief. Just life, music, family, the best soul food spots in Atlanta. For the first time in years, Elena laughed without forcing it. When the bus finally arrived, Daniel held the door open. She turned to him. "Thank you, Daniel. Not just for what you did on the plane, but for reminding me that good people still exist." He gave a small nod. "Good people like you are the reason others still try." She smiled softly. "You know, you sound a lot like him sometimes." Daniel's eyes warmed. Maybe he just rubbed off on both of us. She stepped onto the bus, and as it pulled away, she looked out the window, watching him fade into the glow of the setting sun. A soldier. A stranger. A guardian angel. And as the city lights blinked to life below the desert sky, Elena knew one thing for certain: her healing had finally begun. Sometimes, life sends us reminders in unexpected places. Not through grand gestures or miracles, but through small moments of courage, and strangers who step up when it matters most. Elena boarded that flight burdened by loss and loneliness. But she walked away with something she hadn't felt in years: hope. And Daniel? He never told her that before boarding. He had almost changed his seat to another row. Something, maybe instinct, maybe fate, told him to stay. To sit beside her. To be there when kindness was needed most. It's funny how the smallest decisions can change lives forever. Because sometimes, being seated next to the right person isn't just luck. It's destiny. So if you ever find yourself in a crowded place, and you see someone being treated unfairly, don't look away. Don't stay silent. Because standing up for what's right doesn't just protect others, it heals something inside you too. Elena and Daniel may have been strangers when that flight began, but by the time the wheels touched down, they had both found what they didn't know they'd lost: faith in people. Faith in kindness. Faith in the idea that sometimes, God sits us right where we're needed most. This wasn't just a story about harassment on a plane. It was a story about grace, courage, and the quiet power of doing what's right, even when no one's watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more powerful political stories, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next.